So those of you signing in, I assume they can hear me, Hal, Ben, someone. Those of you guys signing in now, welcome. Glad to have you in. We're a few minutes before start time, so we're going to let some of the other folks jump in here. But those that are already on, we want to say we encourage you to ask questions. Okay. Now we've got, I don't know, 150 folks going to be viewing this webinar, give or take. And if everyone asks a question, obviously we probably can't get to all of them, but we want to make a concentrated effort to reach out and answer these questions as quickly and as many as we can. That's one thing I'm excited about. The guests are eager to do that and cooperating and allowing us to ask real-time questions. You know, some of the webinars that you attend and listen to, you can't ask questions. I mean, you have to watch it, view it, and you may have a question you're dying to ask, and it's too bad you can't ask that. So we're doing things a little bit different. We're encouraging our viewers to ask questions. If we don't know the answer, we're just going to say I don't know the answer. But you know, the thing about that, if you ask me a question I don't know the answer, hopefully one of these two other experts will. But if they don't, now you've asked a question, and I not only want to answer that for you, I want to answer it for me. I turn that into a educational opportunity for me. And I love it when instructors or teachers get to learn something new. It's very refreshing. So I think Hamp's on and Joe Pat's on. How you guys doing this morning?
Good.
Good.
Well,
Good morning.
So we're still a couple of minutes outside the official go time. Hal's up here putting bright lights in my face. I really appreciate that. How's the weather down there in your neck of the world, Hamp?
Oh, it's about 78 and sunshine. I'm looking out my window at the little cardinals playing around. It's a good day.
That sounds very nice.
Yeah.
And Joe Pat, I didn't realize your office is right really across the street. Is that right?
I probably should have walked.
That's great. That's great. Well, it's good to have a close neighbor.
Absolutely.
All right, we're getting close to the official start time. You know, we continue to have more and more folks log in. So welcome those that just chimed in. Good morning, appraisers. Glad you're with us. And we hope you get something out of this webinar. We're excited to be here. Appraiser e-learning is going to start offering these webinars once a month. They're free, no cost to you. And we encourage your questions. So I've got about 3 seconds, I believe. And Hal, are you going to do an introduction for us?
It's actually clicked over to the 10 o'clock hour. So welcome everyone to the webinar. We're excited to have you here. Appraiser e-learning is hosting this webinar. We have with us Hamp Thomas from down in North Carolina. If any of you have taken the home measurement specialist course, you'll recognize his southern drawl. He's one of the most comfortable people to listen to you'll ever meet. We've got Joe Pat McGuigan. Joe Pat is a longtime friend of mine. His father was one of my mentors in the appraisal business. He's a super good kid, super smart kid, and he's gonna chime in as the boots on the ground appraiser expert for us. And then we have Brian Reynolds, the educational director here at Appraiser e-learning. And we were talking about asking questions earlier. If any of you know Brian, there's never been a question that he doesn't have an answer to.
Might not be the right answer.
He's got
I have an answer.
So this webinar is about home measuring and some of the things that people run into. And I think this is a painfully important topic. I think it's one that we don't think about enough. I had a case last year for the state of Tennessee as an investigator where I had to basically come down on an appraiser pretty hard for measuring a house wrong. He actually did something absolutely wrong in the way he measured the house. And I was able to go to the ANSI standard and show this is how it should be done. And I don't know that a lot of appraisers are as familiar with ANSI as they should be. I think HAMP is going to be instrumental in kind of helping you get your head around some of those issues. There's also, and I'm going to go ahead and put this at the front of the webinar, Hamp Thomas is one of our instructors here at Appraiser e-learning. He is the instructor for the home measurement course and the public records course. Both of those courses are fantastic. And if you take both of them together, you can then apply to be a home measurement specialist with Hank Thomas, and he'll speak more to that. But the home measuring course is the place I would suggest starting. Once we're done with this webinar, you've got your questions out there, and you've got your mind kind of thinking about some of these things. The home measurement course is one that I think you should go to. So for now, let's go to Brian Reynolds. Brian, it's your show.
Thanks, Hal. I appreciate the kind words and the introduction. I'd like to welcome the guest, and we really appreciate them being here, guys. We're super excited about continuing to offer these, and this webinar is being recorded. So if you missed out, or if you have a friend or a colleague that is interested in watching this, it should be available a little bit later on. Last month we had Dustin Harris, the appraisal coach, and Craig, an attorney out of Illinois. We're working on a representative from Fannie Mae, and she's committed to attending and participating in a webinar. So we're excited about that. But today we're talking about measuring the house, gross living area, square footage. How do you do it? What do you do? What do you include? What do you not include? And so I wanted to kind of start off and just talk a little bit first about one thing I bring up a lot in my class. So I know this isn't UAD protocol, but you go into a house and there is, it's a story and a half. And you get up on that second level and you go to measure. And when you walk over to that exterior wall, you'd actually hit your head before the tape measure hit the wall, right? So you got a wall coming down to a knee wall. Where do you start your tape measure? And guys, it's very interesting the different answers I get. I had a class of 14 just yesterday, and I got 8 different answers. Okay. So you can't say I'm doing what my peers are doing, because many times your peers are doing all kinds of different things. I've heard 3 foot, 4 foot, 5 feet, 6 feet. I've heard outside divided by 2. I've heard where the break is. I've heard paint to paint, baseboard to baseboard. I've heard head, shoulder. And I love those, because I always say, Hamp, if you're using your head as a measurement, will you please send your shortest appraiser to appraise my house? It'll be bigger, right? And then recognize, if you were in the hot seat, if you were in kind of a regulatory hearing, or if you were in a courtroom setting. I'm sorry, guys. I work with a bunch of nerds here, and they're giving me a hard time. How would you answer that question? Where'd you start your tape measure? And you're going to say your head? I could just envision a bulldog attorney coming back at you and say, what recognized publication can I find that you should start using your head as a measurement? So
have fun with you.
ANSI is a great resource. It's something you can pick up and hold. It's tangible. It's recognized by appraisers, architects, builders worldwide. And we're going to dive right into that. So I guess the first question I have, and I'm going to turn this over to the experts a little bit. We'll start out with Hamp. Hamp is the ANSI guy, by the way. That's what I call him. What in the world is ANSI, Hamp? A lot of appraisers and practitioners and users of appraisal service really don't even know what ANSI is or what it stands for.
Yeah, and let me start off by saying I'm a full-time appraiser. This is what I do. And back in 2003, I wanted to buy a book on how to measure a house. I thought, well, it'd be simple. I'll go online, pick out the one I want, and buy one. There weren't any. So that's when I started working on a book, and then it went into classes. And the thing with ANSI, like right now, you probably are getting too many steps where people are saying your square footage doesn't match the public records. Why is that? If you use the name ANSI, at least they know what that name is, they trust it, and that's usually the end of the conversation. If you're not using ANSI, you're taking a risk, that is just an unnecessary risk. ANSI really is far from perfect. There's like 11 pages of actual learning material or teaching material in there with 5 pages of text. And for a subject this complicated, that's not a lot of ammunition, but right. It's the best we've got, and there's just no reason not to use it.
So we're gonna get in this pretty deep today, and again, we want to spend some time for questions. Obviously, we're not going to have time in 1 hour to cover this as detailed as Hamp would like to, I know, or me for that matter. Joe Pat, let me bring you in here for just a second. So you're a practicing appraiser. you are out appraising single family houses every day. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And how important do you think that it is as an appraiser? God bless you, whoever that was. How important do you feel that it is to measure these properties and be, a lot of what you and I do as appraisers is opinion, right? We develop opinions. But the size of a house really isn't an opinion, it's a fact, okay? And so, how important do you think it is to try and report those facts accurately when it comes to square footage?
I think it's hugely important, not only to give us credibility as appraisers and to our industry, but for obviously as a homeowner, I want to know how big my house is. I want to know what's the number. And as I tell people, which is the way that our industry is, as us as appraisers who've been doing this a long time, I could have an appraiser from my own office follow right behind me, pulling the same tape measure around the house, and we're going to come up with two different numbers. And I tell people that's a fact. There's going to be different square footages. Now, the difference of those square footages should be extremely minimal. And obviously, based on the complexity of the house, the size of the house, that should be a small percentage difference. But I think it is hugely important that we know what we're doing, and the misses should be small misses, if there are any misses on measuring a house.
Sure, sure. Great, thank you. Well, let's get into this, and I think Ben's going to put some screenshots up for some of the viewers here in just a minute. So before we go any further, I want to talk about, what is ANSI, who requires it, is it required? So let's talk about that for just a second. From a USPAP perspective, that's our minimum requirements as appraisers, right? That's our standards and ethics that we have to adhere to. What does USPAP say with regard to ANSI? Do they recognize that as a standard that we have to adhere to, or is it a voluntary standard? And Ben, if you're around, if you could put that up on the screen, we've got a frequently asked question, and we'll take a look at that. Hamp, can you answer that? Can you answer that question? We want the USPAP reference, please.
Got it.
Yeah, and it's really, there's only two states that I know of that require ANSI, and that's Kentucky and Alabama. And as far as USPAP or Fannie Mae, it really says that you're supposed to follow a locally recognized measurement method. And that's pretty much all that you have to rely on. Whatever is acceptable in your local market. That leaves a lot of open area and a lot of things like where you get in the slope ceilings, and everybody's got a different opinion. And if you get six appraisers and six agents in a room and talk about square footage, you're going to have some heated conversations. But that's the thing, if everybody at least follows ANSI, then we're at least kind of on the same basics, the same page to get going with things.
Sure, sure. Boy, wouldn't it be nice if the real estate community as a whole utilized the standard of practice,
Yep.
realtors and assessors, that type of thing.
When I started the Institute of Housing Technologies, there's one ultimate goal is that every real estate professional uses the same measurement standard. I don't care if it's ANSI, something else, or a new one that we create. But if agents, architects, assessors, and appraisers all use the same standard, we'd all be better at our jobs. I mean, it's just, there's no way to help it. And the use of tax records, oh my goodness. I get so many times where we'll have a low appraisal and it ends up we find out that the agent used tax records and it was 200 square feet off. They used their little magic price per square foot formula and they actually came pretty close on that. But when they find out the house is 200 square feet smaller, it makes a little difference. And they're, of course, mad at the appraiser.
Sure, sure. And just let's look at it from a perspective if the appraiser is selling their own home. I mean, just think of it for a second. If you had someone come out that's supposed to be an expert and they measure your house and they misrepresent, could that impact how much you sell the house for? And I think that it could. I've recently gotten my real estate license, like I need something else to do. But I find that our assessor has information incorrect sometimes, and the issue with that is they don't come inside the house. They typically just look at it from the exterior. You know, I had a house recently that has a 1,400 square foot basement, and they had it represented as about 900 square feet. Pretty significant difference there. Another house I actually appraised, the assessor had down the square footage at 1,900 square feet, which is what the real estate professional utilized, 1,900 square foot in the listing and the sale of that home. And when I measured it as a consequence of me being there as an appraiser, it was 2,400 square feet. So, what do you think the seller what would their feelings be about that if they learned that they had advertised and marketed that home at 1,900 square feet when really, in fact, it was 2,400 square feet? And then if we look at the opposite of that, it would be even worse. So I think Ben's finally getting the USPAP issue up right now. I believe he's trying. Um, Basically, I'll just tell you what it says. If it shows up, that'll be great. If not, we tried. Uh, the frequently asked question asks, do appraisers that comply with USPAP have to adhere to the ANSI guide? And there it is. Thank you, Ben. FAQ 165. And you can see the actual answer in uniform standards is no. But my Lord, they took a lot of words to say no, didn't they? So they really say more than no. Appraisers are not required by USPAP to comply. It's a voluntary standard. But then you can see that second paragraph there that's pretty extensive. It says that you're not to render appraisal services in a careless or negligent manner. In other words, it says don't mess up. And the very last sentence kind of says it all. Appraisers must use due diligence and due care in performing appraisal services, including gathering factual data such as square footage. We've already had one question, and the question was, does the state of Tennessee require ANSI standards as their source of all square footage in the state? And my answer to that is no, I don't believe so. As you can see, USPAP says it's a voluntary standard. Now, Ben, if you could put up the KAR statute for our Kentucky appraisers that are watching, there is a requirement in Kentucky, and Hamp said he believes Alabama also has it. And if you can blow that up for us here a little bit. I recently had a debate with an appraiser in the Commonwealth. He said, no, they recommend it, but it's not required. Well, this is a KAR statute in front of you guys. And you can see section 2 there clearly says the standard for calculation and reporting of above grade square footage shall be the ANSI guide. All right. That's pretty clear. And I want to add one more thing before we get back to our experts. When USPAP and law bumps heads, who wins? Law wins. Okay, law would supersede USPAP. So in this particular instance, while USPAP says it's a voluntary standard, law is dictating we must adhere to it in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Hey, Joe Pat, do you guys use a standard of measure? Do you adhere to the ANSI guide, or is there some other technique you guys use when you're out appraising real property?
No, ANSI is obviously the best, I say universal standard, but I think when we try to train our trainees at our office, ANSI is a great source to go through and help answer the tough questions about what is considered to be square footage and what's not considered to be square footage. It's a recognized document everywhere.
Great, great. Hey, Hamp, I guess the next question I want to kind of start with you on is why should we use it? If it's a voluntary, with the exception of Kentucky, and as you said, maybe Alabama has that as well. If it's a voluntary standard, why in the world should we use it? I mean, it's voluntary.
Yeah, I mean, it's a smart business practice. And more, like I was saying before about the AMCs asking why is the square footage different? Whether it's an AMC, a lender, homeowner, whoever it is, if you say the words ANSI, they know what you're talking about. It gives some kind of level of trust. And especially if you're sitting in front of the judge and you say, well, I use the ANSI standard, and the other guy says, well, I've been measuring this way for 30 years and I've never had a problem. The judge is going to like ANSI, no doubt, because you can pick it up and say, look, this is how I measured the square footage. And another person can take that same standard, take your measurements, and come up with, like Joe's saying, it may not be the exact same square footage, but at least it's really close. And anybody can look at that. The homeowner can take your measurements. they can go back and check for themselves if they want to.
Sure,
So it's
absolutely.
just, especially with the way, we're talking about homeowners finding out later that their house is bigger than they thought it was. You're just so much safer to use something that you've got some protection on, because you may end up in court. Like if I was that homeowner and found out, there's 400 or 500 square feet difference in my house, I'm probably going to see you in front of a judge.
Right, right,
So
absolutely. And there's been some lawsuits out there, lawsuits that have occurred against appraisers as well as real estate agents. Is there any of those that come to mind, Hamp, that
yeah,
you
and
could
a
let us
lot
know
of
about?
them, and I don't know if Ben can put these up or not, but several of them are dated, but yet these are things that are recorded. They're facts, and when it comes in front of a judge, I think there was three of them, and they're the ones. This is what they're going to look at. This is what sets the precedent, and it says that we are the real estate experts and we are supposed to do this right. Okay, he's got up the one about the Texas one. Let's see. Yeah, 253 square feet. That's a lot of difference. Professionals should not have that much difference when they're measuring on there. So, in the others, yeah, let's see. The real estate professional has the duty to get out, or to buyers shouldn't have to come up with it. You're the expert, you're supposed to know it. And if appraisers are the ultimate experts, we need to have one standard that we all follow. How can we expect agents to do better when we can't even agree on, a national standard?
Sure, sure. And it's a matter of education, I believe. There are some issues with ANSI that I personally have some problems with, but I believe, and Hamp and I were speaking before the webinar started. At least we have something. It could always be improved upon, but at least we have something tangible. And guys, you can see Ben's putting up some various court cases. We've got a Texas court here. We've got an Arizona court that held the appraiser accountable. We have an Oklahoma Supreme Court decision here, and there's many others that we could pull up. So welcome, Brandy. Glad to have you in. We continue to have people joining the webinar, and we appreciate you guys coming in and supporting us. We encourage you to ask some questions. We are starting to get some questions rolling in, and we'll get to those in just a second.
Brian, if I can, let me just say a
Sure.
little bit about ANSI. That it's a voluntary guideline, but if appraisers have ideas on how to make this thing better, and like one of my pet peeves is enclosed sunrooms and things like that, where everybody disagrees on how to count it. But
Sure.
you can send in suggestions to ANSI, and they will look at this stuff every year. So,
Right.
we can make it better if we'll take the time, to send these things in and
It's a matter
participate.
of it's a matter of getting involved, isn't it? It's a matter
Exactly
of
right.
getting involved.
Exactly
Hey,
right.
Joe Pat, let me turn to you for this next topic, and you just kind of take as much time as you want here.
Sure.
We've got some folks, mostly appraisers, watching today, but we've got some real estate professionals. We've actually got some lenders. There may be even an AMC or two out there watching. What is GLA? We hear that term a lot. What is GLA? What is it? What's the relevance of GLA in the appraisal process?
So GLA stands for gross living area, and the importance of GLA, and I think the communication from an appraiser and how we talk about GLA is different than maybe than how some real estate agents talk about square footage. And the illustration I think that comes up a lot when I talk to people about square footage entails basement. And as an appraiser, we are always talking about above grade square footage is different than below grade square footage. Most real estate agents and most homeowners do not see that difference. They
Right.
like to total up the entire heated and cooled space. And the illustration that I like to use a lot is 1,000 square foot ranch house. And then next door to it is 1,000 square foot ranch house with a basement and 1,000 square feet of finished area in the basement. They're going to say one's 2,000 and one's 1,000 square feet. From an appraiser standpoint, they're both 1,000 square foot homes, It's just that one has 1,000 square feet in the basement or below grade. And that, from an appraisal standpoint, and while we use that and make sure that that's important, is we want to compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges, so that we're not mixing up square footages, so that I don't take that 2,000 square foot, total square footage house and try to compare it to a 2-story, 2,000 square foot home. I need to find other 1,000 square foot ranch homes that have basements and compare that to that 2,000 square foot, just like the subject property. So it's important that you understand what the different square footages are in your property, so that you can compare them to other properties when you go look for comparables.
Yeah, that
Right.
well said. And that actually, we need not to get hung up on, the above and below grade, especially in the room count things. But it's just a method of categorizing the information. It's
Right.
yeah, that word came out good. It's not about value, and we need to make sure we don't confuse the two on there.
Sure.
But that was
Sure.
well said.
We have another question here, and I'm going to let you guys tackle this one, and I'm happy to chime in as well. But the question is, in states that do not require the ANSI measurements, so it's not a consequence of a state issue, is it misleading to the client or intended user not to use a recognized standard of measurement? Whichever
Wow,
one of you want to take that.
that's a loaded question.
It's a matter of interpretation. I'll give my thoughts on that because Hal says I haven't answered everything, but as a disclosure, I'm often wrong, right? So, in my opinion on that, you could argue that, Tim, several different ways. Um, in one manner, I could say yes, it could be construed, but in another manner, I'd say, well, if you're putting it on a Fannie Mae form, one argument could be is I'm asked you to adhere to Fannie Mae guidelines. Fannie Mae has protocol that they want the exterior measured. They don't, as Joe Pat said, don't want the basement area included in GLA. So I mean, I think that would be my argument as a consultant on a defense if you didn't have something in there. But boy, if you put something in there, it clears that right up, doesn't it? I mean, it makes it, and I believe, Hamp, you recommend that they list
As
what
every
standard of
report
measurement
ought
they
to
use.
have the disclosure in there that the measurements were based on the ANSI guideline, or if you're using American Measurement Standard or anything else, however you measure it, there ought to be a comment in your report that says how you came up with that finished square footage total.
Great. I want to talk for a minute about some problem areas. And again, I want to remind our viewers, if you have any questions, go ahead and send those in to us, and we're going to get to as many questions as we can, hopefully all of them. So if you have any questions during this process, go ahead and start asking those questions, and how we'll filter those through. What are some of the problem areas that we see? I mean, Hamp, you mentioned earlier sunrooms. What about garage conversions? Do we include those in the gross living area? Do we not include those?
Yeah.
I just sold a house, acting out, taking my appraiser hat off, putting my real estate hat on. I just sold a house and they have a bonus room above the garage. But the only way to access that bonus room is to go out into the garage and go up a staircase that's actually in the garage up to that second level.
Yeah, and
Is that,
ANSI says
yeah,
it's not GLA, but
okay.
the most agents are going to include that in the finished square footage count on there. And you got the sunrooms, even things like when you have circular stairs going up, or you got a staircase in an old house, that's 19 inches wide or something. Is the upper level GLA? A lot of people talk about attic space. There's a lot of it depends in that space. And that's one thing, ANSI really doesn't cover a lot of that kind of thing. And that's where it's very subjective. And I'd like to see that get expanded on some more. Things like rooms that have mini splits. In our market, those mini split wall systems, or builders are using those more and more. And it costs them like 20-25% less, to do a finished room with that. Is that GLA? According to ANSI, it's not. But it's one of those it depends, and you can believe that the homeowner and the most agents want that included in the GLA. And if you don't have it, they're not happy with you.
I think it's important as an appraiser to make sure whatever square footage that we're comparing to, that we're, again, kind of my illustration with apples to apples, oranges to oranges. I've got some, you know, 1-story ranches that they've snuck a staircase in and been able to go up in the attic and finish out essentially the elongated room that's got a ceiling height of 7 feet. Is that considered to be square footage? Well, it's heated and cooled. And obviously the ceiling height is on the is I think with the ANSI standard is 7 feet.
Yep.
But is somebody going to use that as a room? And when I go and find comparables, are those other comparables at that square footage going to have a similar room to what my subject property has? Absolutely. So it does become a difficult gray area as to how do we consistently use accurate information.
Exactly.
When
The best thing,
market's using it.
the phrase that you're using, apples to apples, that's what I use all the time. When you're comparing properties, the best thing you can do is apples to apples. So just think about, if this is finished living area, it's all heated and cooled by a central system. Does this room work in the house? Is the functional utility the same as the rest of the finished living area? And if the answer is yes, then you can count it. Back to the garages, so many people are finishing garages and they want that included in the GLA. ANSI says a garage is never GLA. But that's a tough thing. And there's a lot of people that if you put a bedroom, a walk-in closet, and a bathroom in the garage and it opens to the house, what do you do?
Right. Guys, I've got a couple of questions coming in. So let me throw these out there. Blair asks, is anyone working on getting a measurement class approved for new appraisers as part of their training to become an appraiser? What a great question.
And I've been working on. I have like 10 hours so far, and I need 14 hours to get that. But I'm working on it. It's a slow process to get it going through, but I'm trying to work on it. And one thing I can say, Brian, I hope it's okay to say this, that Appraiser e-learning is working on a video class of measuring square footage that's going to have a video, of any measurement that you can run into. We're going to try to have it in that video. So it may be, 6 or 8 months before we get that out, but we're working on it anyway.
Great, great. So the just to clarify, Hamp, the 14-hour class, you're trying to develop that for qualifying credit. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly.
Fantastic, fantastic. So Blair, there's an answer for you. Hamp's working on one. To our knowledge, there's not one yet.
There's not one anywhere that
I
I know.
don't think there's any requirement for a measurement class. So this would be an elective course, is what you're working on, Hamp. It sounds like.
Yeah, and
So,
I would love to have it mandatory. I think it ought to be mandatory for new agents and appraisers.
yeah, yeah. I will say this: I've got a student, a regular student, David, here in the Nashville market, and he requires not only all his new appraisers to take an ANSI class, he also requires all his new real estate agents to take the ANSI class. And I really commend him for doing that, not because he's buying a class from us, but because he has, the vision of trying to get these folks to accurately represent the size of these homes. I have another question you guys can tackle here, and it's kind of a long question, so bear with me. Paul asked, he says, a local newer subdivision of contemporary colonial consistently has incorrect assessor's GLA measurements, sometimes 400 to 500 square feet off the actual measurements. Other than inspecting I'm sorry, guys. Other than inspecting each sale in person, there is no way to verify the accuracy of the assessor's records. If all the comps in the same neighborhood show 2,500 square feet, including the subject property, but you actually measure it as 2,000 square feet, wouldn't it be misleading to represent the subject as having less square footage, as this would show a negative value adjustment? How does ANSI recommend the best way to approach something like this? What a great question.
To my knowledge, they don't.
Yeah,
And that happens a lot. And new construction, plans they're wrong probably as much as they are right. And that's a hard question. I mean, there's no answer. ANSI doesn't give you an answer, and no one else, that I know of says how to handle that. And if you know that house is a lot different, and 400 to 500 square foot mistakes are not uncommon, there's no easy answer of the best way to handle that.
Yeah.
That's a tough situation.
I'm going to give an answer, but Joe Pat, do you have any, do you want to chime in on that before I?
The only suggestion that I would have is obviously if you know that there's something out there that's wrong and misleading, you should be using it as data in your appraisal report because that data that you're putting in there, you're responsible for. So make sure that if you know that there's an error, that you vet whatever you need to do to verify that information is accurate. There can be some, obviously, and as we saw in some of those examples, some serious implications to you and your license and your E&O insurance if you don't.
Yep. And I always try to go to the builder and tell them and take the sketch and say, okay, this is what you're putting in. This is what we're measuring. What can we do? And
Yeah,
that's what
great. Great comment, Hamp. I mean, maybe the builder needs to be aware of this, Paul, because think about these folks. I mean, they're buying these houses thinking they're 2,500 square feet, and a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, they go to sell their house and advertise it as 2,500 square feet, and the old horrible appraiser comes out and it's a rude awakening. Your house isn't 2,500 square feet; it's 2,000. But back to your original question, I'll offer up a couple of suggestions. But again, this is just my opinion. Um, First of all, I would not misrepresent the actual size of the subject property. If you measure that and you conclude that it's 2,000 square feet, I think you're charged with accurately reporting the size of the subject property. So I think you've got to put down it's 2,000 square feet. Now, when it comes to your comps, I think you've got some options here. If you wanted to list those as 2,500 square feet on the grid and make zero adjustment, and then provide very, very adequate commentary, like you did in your question. We know that these are not accurate. Everyone I've done's been at 2,000. It's reasonable to conclude it's the same model house. It's going to be the same, or uh, you change those to the 2,000 and make the statement, right? Obviously, the commentary is the key here. The other suggestion is to try to contact maybe other appraisers that may have appraised those comps when they were subject properties for them. USPEP now allows us to exchange non-confidential information, and square footage would be considered non-confidential. So it's not a great answer, Paul. It's the only one I've got.
I've used a similar technique, Brian, with condos, especially when you're in a building that has 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom units. I know that I'm comparing 1 bedroom units to other 1 bedroom units, and they are the exact same floor plan, but what I measured is different than kind of what's being recorded, and I'll make the zero adjustment and state why I've made a zero adjustment to the comps.
Right, 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 right. Yeah, I see folks doing that, or I see folks actually changing and saying, I have reasonable information to believe that they are mirror images of my subject property. I personally measured the subject property. It's 900 square feet. The local assessor is known to have some inaccuracies. So the 1,100 square feet, in my opinion, probably is not correct as it's a mirror image of the subject. I'm going to use 900. So you could do it that way, or you could list your subject at 900, the comp at 1,100, make no adjustment. So there's a couple of different ways I think you could handle that. I don't know if Ben's got this up and ready to throw on the screen, but there was one that Hamp in your course you have, and I wanted to bring this to highlight when you're measuring a second level dormer. Okay, I believe even the experienced appraisers may miss this, and so I wanted to bring this up and show this. And Hamp, I'm going to let you walk us through. And guys, let me tell you something right now. If you're an appraiser that's been out there for 40 years, no disrespect, but to say I've been doing it this way for 40 years doesn't mean anything. Because if you've been doing something wrong for 40 years, you're just really good at doing something wrong. Okay, so it's not a valid defense, if you will, to say I've been doing it that way 10 years or 20 years or 30 years or even 40 years.
Okay, I'm just going to respond to her that just says she basically has two different situations here.
John just
Yes, I'm
ended,
in.
and
Yes.
for some reason I can hear you, John. So thank you. I'm sure it was a very interesting conversation, but we had to mute you. So go ahead, Hamp.
It's just the dormers, it's not a big difference, but when most people are doing dormers and doing the length out to the outside, they're basically counting that first wall 2 times. They
Right.
measure to the window and then they add
Hey,
5, 10.
Ben, can you put that image back up, please? Ben can get that image. He had it up. I'd like for him to put that up while you walk us through that, Hamp, if you don't mind. I'm sorry. So go ahead.
But look, if you look on the length measurement, the measurement, I guess I can't point it here, can when you're doing the length, you're starting at the beginning of that interior wall. So you've got 5/10 or 6 inches when you start. So when you measure that length, you don't add the exterior wall. And most people automatically add the exterior wall just like they do for every other measurement on there. Whoops, sorry.
Yeah, go back one image, Ben, and if we can enlarge that a little bit. Guys, I think this is probably something that a lot of us as practicing appraisers do. Nope, he just got rid of it. If you could pull that image back up, Ben, and enlarge that for me, that'd be great. So what Hamp is saying is, guys, you're measuring from the inside, and a common error is, and I don't know, Hamp, can you see my pointer here moving around?
No.
Okay, nobody can see my pointer. But if you look at that bottom arrow there, the red one and the black one pointing up, thanks, right there.
Yeah.
We start there, and then we measure all the way up on the inside there, and then appraisers tend to add the thickness of that wall. The problem with doing that is you're starting at the wrong spot to include that outside. Exactly. So don't include the outside. Ben, if you move that little cursor over here to the back down at the bottom and on the outside of the wall, okay, right up and to your left a little bit. It's hard when you're not right there. If you were going to be doing exterior, the measurement should begin there and go up to the outside, okay? But because you can't get to that measurement, you're actually starting on the inside. That's why you don't add the thickness of that exterior wall. Is that fair, Hamp?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So, guys, I think that illustration kind of sums that up, but we see that pretty often that appraisers will use the starting point on the inside. They'll measure to the interior wall and then add the thickness of the outside wall. And this is one instance where you would not do that.
Exactly.
Any other problem areas you see, even for the experienced appraiser, Hamp, when we come to improper measurement techniques?
Yeah, and no, it's more not really technique so much. The stairs and what's included. There's still a big discrepancy on appraisers. Some people don't count stairs on both levels, and ANSI says you count the square footage on both levels where they start. First and second floor. And a lot of people, I was taught to measure stairs, counting them only on one level. But ANSI specifically says you got to count them on both floors. And there's a lot of appraisers that still do it different. I see it not every day, but every few weeks anyway. You look over a report and they don't count the same. So that's probably one of the worst areas anyway. And then it's more about what spaces are included in finished living area, like people using a finished office inside of a garage, but you got to go in the garage to get to it. It's heated and cooled and carpet and all that, but that's not GLA.
Right. Let's talk for another minute. And Joe Pat, maybe you've run across this. You mentioned the ceiling height earlier on a second level. And this is in all honesty, guys, this is one of the issues I have with ANSI. But again, at least we've got something. I'm in 100% agreement with Hamp. It's something you can sink your teeth into. It is a nationally recognized standard. Could it be improved? Probably so, but it's better than nothing. Okay, but stay with me here, and I'm going to get your guys' take on this. You go look at a property and it's a story and a half. The house consists of 2 bedrooms and a bathroom on the primary level. You go upstairs and there are 2 additional sleeping quarters with a full bathroom on the second level. You start at that 5 foot mark, right, Hamp? And you measure across to get the square footage of that second level. But then you notice that the ceiling height in the entire level is questionable. So you actually measure from the floor to the ceiling and you find that it's 6'2". So in accordance to ANSI, we're not including any of that area. Now, the problem I have with this is we as appraisers are supposed to analyze the actions of market participants, right? We actually are called analysts, if you want to boil it down even more. So if we are analyzing the actions of market participants, how do the market participants view that house? Do they honestly view it as a 2 bedroom, 1 bath? Or do they view it as a 4 bedroom, 2 bath? I mean, they're quite frankly, who are they going to put upstairs? They're going to put the little people upstairs, right? They're going to put the kids upstairs. And they most certainly consider that as finished area. So I could talk about some ways I handle that, but it is a challenge. And I think it's one of the issues with ANSI that we struggle with a little bit because we're supposed to analyze the actions of the market. And if the market is viewing it that way, gosh, it seems like we should be. But ANSI sometimes won't let us do that. So Hamp, how would you guys and Joe Pat, how would you guys handle that particular issue?
Yeah, Joe Pat, go ahead.
No, I think obviously most importantly, and as long as we are all following a similar standard, as far as how I would draw it, I would draw it and calculate it separately, just so that I make sure that I identify, this part of our house has normal ceiling heights, whether that be an 8 foot or 8.5 foot ceiling height. But then I can identify this other square footage that is represented differently because of its low ceiling height. And then obviously from there, the challenge, and most importantly, is going to be looking at your comparables and understanding what square footage did they have that would be similar low ceiling heights. And if you're if you're unable to reach consistency on those, or you do find other square footage that does have a taller ceiling height, then you're going to need to be making some sort of functional adjustment for the fact that you've got inferior ceiling heights compared to your market.
Yep. It's subjective, and that requires you to analyze it and make a determination as to the value. It's still, you're talking about which category you put it in. It's not apples to apples. It's not the exact same, but just because you list it as gross building area, maybe it's got the same value as the other space, or maybe, there ought to be some kind of a functional adjustment on there for that space, in my opinion, anyway.
Great, great. We have another question for you guys, and Robert asked a question, and before I get to that question, because it expands what I'm about to say, let's just talk in general. And Robert, I'm coming to you, I promise. His question is about three levels. So we'll get to that in just a second. But before I ask that more specific question, let's just talk about stairs for a minute. This is a common issue, guys, that I see when I'm instructing classes. And Joe Pat mentioned a moment ago about 1,000 square foot house. So let's use that. The first level, it's a 2-story house. And the first level has 1,000 square feet. And the second level has 1,000 square feet. Are you with me? It's just a box. 1,000 on the first floor, 1,000 on the second floor. We have a staircase that leads from the first floor to the second floor. How do you handle the staircase? Hamp, a lot of times, and Joe Pat, a lot of times I'll find appraisers that actually want to cut out that area below the staircase. They're not calling it a 2,000 square foot home. They're calling it a 2,000 square foot home less the area underneath the staircase. So before I get to Robert's more detailed question, let's go over that real quickly if we can.
Yeah, and that's the way I was taught to measure, that you cut that space out of the second level. However, I wish all houses would be that simple to measure. But I mean, if it's like that, the 2 stories, it's a box. You count it full space on both levels, as long as the opening on the upper level, is the same as the bottom. It's just 2 stories of the same square footage. But probably 40 to 50% of the appraisers will take that box out. Or I don't know if that percentage is right, but a lot of them still do. And that's the way I was taught to do
Joe Pat, do you guys come across that?
No, and I think Ham just made a really good point there. Is that's how we're taught because there's not a course. There's not something. I mean, I think all of us are nodding our heads because all of us were taught by somebody to do something a certain way, and that's the way we do it. And I was taught to include them.
Right.
Not that I'm right. It's just the way I was taught. And I think and I think a lot of people can just shake their head saying, yeah, that's just
it.
the way we've been taught by our supervisor.
Like
Sure, sure.
home builders, like Donald Gardner Architects. It's a big firm. They don't count the stairs on the second level. You know, that's just the way they do it. And, there's no guideline for architects, assessors, or anybody else. So everybody's got different ways they count those stairs.
Right, right. ANSY's very clear on that issue, though. ANSY's very, very clear on that issue, guys. So if you want to adhere to a nationally recognized standard and you're going to adhere to ANSI, then you're not going to take that area out. Now, if you have a 2-story foyer, then obviously you're going to cut that area out. So now with that as a premise, let me get into Robert's specific question because he's talking about 3 levels. Excuse me. So this is Robert's question. He says, what about a 3-level stairs from the basement to the first floor and second floor area over the stairs? Physically 2 stair runs that connect 3 levels. Basement already has storage under the staircase, and second floor has not storage over the stairwell. Should we count the stair run once or twice?
You can't. ANSI says, let's just say you have a 1 level dwelling and there's unfinished stairs to the basement. Well, you're not going to take that space out of the first level. You're still going to count that. So if you've got, it's basically, we're just increasing our box. And where we had a 2-story house, we're counting all of it. If you've got a 3-story house, you're counting them on all levels. That's what ANSI says, to count those stairs. If you've got 2 of them, you count it on every level.
Okay. And guys, we've only got a few minutes left. So if you have any questions, go ahead and send those in. They are coming in. Andy asked a question. Andy asked a question and he says he qualifies it by saying, not sure I can explain this properly, but when a garage sticks out from a home, and you cut that area out since it is not heated or cooled, it takes away from the exterior wall of the remaining home. I don't see many appraisers account for this, but I take into account the width of the wall that is shared between the heated portion of the home and the garage. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the way you should do it. I mean, because when you're measuring the garage, the measurement goes from the outside of the garage to the interior wall of the garage. So you're giving the living area credit for the wall on the inside of the garage. So he's doing it exactly right.
Great, great.
I think it's pretty, and this is just listening to the questions, and it's pretty amazing how how many places there are for misinterpretation or for someone to round and include a wall or not include a wall, and you can real easily start seeing where these small differences of square footage start appearing between different appraisers and different professionals when they measure homes. There's 1,000 different cases where these are just interpretations, and obviously ANSI does address these, but there's going to be interpretations in the field where people start just making decisions as they're measuring a home.
Yeah, and I still think there ought to be an appraisal, a college degree for appraisers, and measuring square footage ought to be one of the main classes that's included in there. I mean, that's kind of like at the heart of every appraisal. So we ought to be taught in the very beginning how to do that.
Brian, I think one thing that if everybody out there, if you do not own a laser measuring device, go purchase one right now. Hop onto Amazon. I've got a Leica. I love it. It is, I think it's the Disto 2 is the actual one. It's the cheapest model they make. It's highly accurate, and it makes life. I'm more accurate and I'm quicker by having it. So get one.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Joe Pat. We as human beings resist change, and in particular of appraisers, we resist change. And I think that's evident by, when a new form comes out, we all freak out, don't we? And so we resisted using digital cameras and the software and the lasers and the mobile technology out in the field. And guys, we're going to try and bring as much of that to you information wise as we can. We're working on trying to get some technology out to appraisers and how to use these devices. Hamp, what are your thoughts on that laser technology for the measurement systems, as Joe Pat had indicated? Is that something that you recommend? Are they fairly accurate? Are they very accurate? I know for me, I used to have one that bounced off the wall sound wise. And the challenge I had from that was, am I bouncing off the wall or am I bouncing off the bar or the column or the chair over there? I didn't have a laser to look at. But with the
Yeah.
laser technology, what are your thoughts on that,
Yeah,
Hamp?
and it's really, I'm so old school, I had to carry both for 2 years until I convinced myself that the laser was absolutely accurate. There's no reason. I know I'm still surprised sometimes at how many people use the tape measures just because that's what they learn. But if you ever start using the laser, I mean, there's just no way that you won't keep on. You will love it if you try it.
Joe Pat, what was your learning curve on that? Guys, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but is this, if I go out and buy one today, am I going to be proficient in that in 3 years or 3 months or 3 minutes? What's
I
it
would,
going to take me?
I would say within a week, you would be. And again, when people ask me about how accurate it is, it's more accurate than my tape measure, is what I tell them. And I
Right.
can show them that by I can show them the quarter-inch difference on a piece of trim or a three-quarter-inch piece of difference on a piece of trim with it from shooting it across the room. It's that accurate. One of the on the Leica that I have, it allows you to add dimensions and it allows you to subtract dimensions. And as I tell people, when you start having to do math in the field is when you start making mistakes. And this takes all the guesswork out of it. It does it for you. It's accurate. And I tell people too, if you can't see the laser, don't trust it. So especially
That
on
model's not so expensive, so it's not, you don't have to spend 600 on one. For a couple of $100, you can get a tool that'll do a great job.
And you look really cool out in the field, right? Zapping that laser around.
my
Hey,
kids,
And
baby.
my cats love it.
I've got one more, one more. Well, I've got a couple more real quick, and I'm gonna pull them in. Robert comes back and says, without an opposing wall to bounce the laser off of, is it actually more accurate and less time consuming to measure the exterior perimeter on a house? Joe Pat, you're out there, you don't have something to bounce off of. How do you accommodate that?
Exactly. I'll tell you this. I love shooting gutters. I love shooting electrical boxes on the outside of houses and adding. Again, as long as I can see the laser, I'm going to trust it. And as well, I will shoot it 3 times to make sure that I'm getting the consistent number back, so that I know and I can trust what it's saying. And believe me, it'll take you about a week because you'll see a number and you'll say, that doesn't seem right. And then you'll pull a tape through the bushes and you'll go, that was exactly right. So again, I think it's important to make sure that when you're measuring, to see it and trust it. If you can't see the laser, do not trust it.
Or
Hey
even
guys, we're
past it.
we're
And
running out of time, and there's a couple of things I want to kind of squeeze in. So all you viewers, I apologize. We did start on time, and if you can bear with me, we're gonna go just another second or two. John, who is the president of the National Association of Appraisers, logged in a little bit ago. He was the guy that we were listening in to this conversation. But John just put a statement up, and he asked, "What does everyone think?" And this is what he said. He says the National Association of Appraisers is, which if you're not a member, you should join. Hamp was saying earlier, we all need to get involved, and that's a great way to do it. The National Association of Appraisers is considering communicating the need for a standard with all appraisal organizations and with NAR. What do you guys think about that?
100%. That's
Right.
somebody that will take action and get something done. He's the perfect man to do it.
Great, great. Well, I want to thank our guest, Joe Pat McWiggins and Hamp Thomas, the ANSI guy. We do have a couple of questions coming in, but guys, we're just running out of time. Hamp, I'm going to give you about a minute, just real quick. And I apologize, we didn't have more time. Uh, Talk about just real as quick as you can about your little credential that you have. If appraisers are interested in learning more and want to stand out from the crowd with this ANSI stuff.
And we started the home measurement specialist, the HMS. You take the ANSI 7-hour course and the public records course, and we have a lot of great plans of what we're going to do in the future with this thing. But it's a credential that you can offer to your clients that says you care about square footage and you've learned a little bit more than everybody else, and you're an expert in that field. And let me say this quickly. If anybody's got a question, send it in. If you've got pictures or something detailed, and I'll be glad to answer it.
Hey guys, go ahead and we'll put this up in some of the comments or whatnot when we have this available on our website. But just real quick for those watching, I'd ask both of you, Joe Pat and Hamp, if you don't mind giving maybe your email address, if someone wants to reach out to you directly, if you don't mind, go ahead, Hamp.
Yeah, just send mine to pinehurstappraiser@gmail.com. Pinehurst Appraiser.
My address is Joe Pat. That's JOEPAT at. It's the first three letters of McWiggin, MCG. First three letters of appraiser, APP.com.
Thanks, guys. Again, I want to thank our guest, Joe Pat McWiggins, practicing appraiser here in the Nashville market, and Mr. Hamp Thomas, author of some ANSI publications, public records. I'm Brian Reynolds with Appraiser e-Learning, and we'd like to thank the fine folks over at Appraiser e-Learning to offer these webinars free of charge to anybody that's interested in checking us out. And we will be offering these once a month. As I said, we hope to have a Fannie Mae representative next month. And if you have any suggestions on folks that you would like for us to bring in via a free live webinar or a topic that you would like for us to discuss, please reach out to Ben, Hal, myself, any of the team members. You can see our technical guys there. They just kind of loaf most of the time. But if you have any questions,
I know that's not true.
Ben, did you want to say something?
Yeah, let me jump in and just say thanks everybody for attending. We will have a recorded version of this webinar ready today. So like Brian said earlier, if you had friends or anybody, colleagues that missed it and they'd like to take the time to watch it, we'll have a recorded version sent out to everybody that joined us today. So thanks again.
Thanks again, guys. Have a great week. It's Thursday. You're almost at the weekend, and I know no appraisers ever work on the weekend, so have a great week. Well, at least you don't have to worry about lenders and AMCs calling you, right? Have a fantastic weekend. Thanks to my guest. Happy appraising, guys. Talk to you real soon.
Thanks, guys.